The second C that I want to offer you in this module is context. Now, if last time we looked at circumstance, we could call that the external context of the passage. This context means the internal context. Now, what that means is to see what is its position within the whole book. So what's its position within the book? So if you are looking at one of the parables of Jesus, is to not look at the parable just for itself, but to see how that parable fits within the chapter that you're reading. How that chapter fits within the whole story of that gospel. If you're reading Paul's letters, just to understand that Paul has an argument. And so therefore, if you're reading one section of a passage of Romans, is to understand that it's very hard to do that. Because that one section usually is part of a flow of argument. And so if you're going to interpret that, if you're going to preach on that one passage, then you need to actually have a sense of what is the flow around it. So essentially, what is its position? What is the position of that particular passage within the context of the whole book, the whole passage, the chapter, and the actual place within the scripture itself? So context, the internal context. The other things then is to see who are the characters. Who are the characters within the story? So is it Jesus? Is it someone else? Is it fictional characters? So in the parables, what is it that is the particular person or the character within the story that makes up the concept of context? What are the internal characters and what are they doing? Maybe sometimes they're doing something that is unusual. Who are they and how they fit within that particular story? Sometimes, in fact, we need to even be careful because the characters aren't always obvious. Sometimes the characters are implied and we need to see what are those characters that are there. So we've got position, we've got the character, we've got the internal environment. The internal environment. What is the environment of the story that's happening? What is the way in which that story is working within itself? How are the characters relating to each other? Where are they in that process? When in fact the Bible tells us that Jesus goes to Tyre and Sidon, immediately what needs to happen in our heads, we need to say, well, obviously it's now Gentile territory. And if it's Gentile territory, most probably the people that Jesus is connecting with here are Gentiles. Now, if they're Gentiles, how is that environment affecting the understanding of that particular passage? And so here we have the internal context, as opposed to just the general context on the outside, the external context. So internally, what is happening between the story? The other thing that we can see in terms of context is the way in which the word usage. So how are the words used? What is the word usage that's there? Which words are used as opposed to others? And what do those words mean? What are the connections with them? So that's an internal context, because there's certain things that are there which you wouldn't have expected. So what is the internal context for that? Word usage. The other one, for example, is the usage of the Tanakh. Usage of the Tanakh is another internal context concept. It's saying how they're trying to relate this passage to possibly the Tanakh and the way in which the Tanakh is connecting to this particular passage. This is particularly for the New Testament. Of course, within the Tanakh, you can ask yourself, how is this passage relating itself to the rest of Tanakh? If it's a book of prophecy, how is that connecting to law? If it's part of law, what is it trying to teach us in terms of our understanding of a relationship with God? So in each of those would be the concepts of the internal context, the internal connections with what the passage is wanting to do, and how that passage fits within the broader framework of both the book and the people within it.